We'll try for a quick story. 1991, my sophomore year of high school. I mean, in theory for us, it was our freshman year of high school because our junior high school was 7th, 8th, and 9th. So hard to consider your freshman year of high school when you're in your junior high school still, but there's that. So 1991, we started at Harry S. Truman High School in Levittown, Pennsylvania. Typical, juniors and seniors were bullies, blah, blah, blah. As I've said in the past, I was not very athletic, sucked at football, and had always been fat, so there's that. First day of gym class, had a teacher named Mr. Wodak. I believe he was in his late 80s at the time. Found it hard to believe that he was still teaching, but he was. And he was a stout, what would appear outwardly angry man, which I assume dealing with us as youth for the previous 45 years would probably have that effect on you. The first thing that came out of his mouth during that initial gym class was, "If assholes were airplanes, this fucking place would be an airport." I found that to be a strange opening line as a teacher, and had not really been exposed to that, to that sort of rhetoric before that. And again, not justifying what he did, but I'm sure that was a direct correlation to the assholes that he had to deal with on a daily basis, having been a teacher for that long, and knowing that the people that I went to school with and the people that were ahead of us, and just basically what kind of Levittown was. When I moved there, I was like 12, and it was kind of like I don't know, it was a neat place. The kids were kind of, the young adults were kind of on their own. They made these like elaborate forts in the woods and whatnot, and were drinking on the weekends and having little bonfires. I mean, it was a strange place. Heavy metal was a major influence in that area, at that time. The different sections of Levittown all had their own gangs, and they used to like have rumbles and whatnot on the weekends. On Fridays and Saturdays, they'd just go to the power lines and fight. I mean, that was kind of a little bit ahead of my time, and I was never really involved in much of that. But I had friends whose older brothers were like kingpins in that, and it was just a strange thing for me, being that I had moved from, like a farm area, and then before that had just basically lived in apartments all my life. So yeah, 1991, I'm sitting in gym class, and my teacher is Mr. Wodak, and that's how he introduces himself to us, and he was I'd say he was a good teacher. He was strict and whatnot. He had some quirks about him that I don't think would fly in today's school age. He, like for one, is if you got into a fight in his class, he would stop the class, and then he would take you guys, whoever you were fighting, and he would take you up to the wrestling practice room, which is a fully padded out room on the second floor of the gymnasium area, and he would say, "Fight it out here." He'd allowed you to work out your differences and beat each other up until one of you gave up or surrendered, and then he'd force you guys to shake hands and be done with it. And I always found that, it was fascinating to me that he would, because later, after like his kind of teaching was done, and I was a senior, I almost got expelled for things. You know what I mean? Like they just started to change policy, and I guess he was just that old school, that old world teacher. But the union was so powerful that they couldn't do anything about him, so they just kind of let him do his thing until he decided that he wanted to retire, and he retired. I mean, I think my sophomore year was his last year. He also, another quirk that he had was, you know, like at that time period, youth smoking was a big thing. And like, I mean, Truman was one of the schools that at one point had a section for students to be able to smoke at. There was like courtyards and stuff that you could smoke at some point, but that changed in the late 80s, early 90s. But that didn't change the behavior of the students. They all tried to sneak cigarettes into the bathrooms and whatnot, and they would get caught. Or they would, like in gym class, they would like step out back into the field behind the school, and they would smoke. And Mr. Wodak, I mean, you know, it was a violation of policy to get caught smoking, and they had some clear guidelines. They were like, you get caught smoking, you get sent to the office. I think you got detention and a $50 fine, and they had to call your parents, and you had to get picked up that day or whatever. And you know, that was enough for most people to keep most people from smoking. But you know, there was always those rebellious kids that would smoke, and I didn't smoke at the time, so it was never really an issue for me. All of this for me was being seen or observed as a spectator. So, but Mr. Wodak, when he caught you, he brought you again up to that weight room, or I'm sorry, up to that padded wrestling room, and he gave you a choice, because you know, his choice was clear. His job at that point was, he could send you to the office and you could get fined, and your parents would come pick you up, and then you would have detention, obviously, or you could let him beat the shit out of you with a wiffle ball bat. And that's what he did. And crazy enough is, almost all the students who would get caught smoking chose the baseball bat or the wiffle ball bat method. And I just found it interesting, and it was just a thought that popped into my mind. You know, I guess, you know, they were the people back then that were shaping us as individuals. You know, one of his jobs is to shape us into becoming viable members of society, and that was the methodology. And again, you know, he was probably pretty toned down, because he came up in a time where, like, you know, he came up teaching during the civil rights movement, and he also was a part of the merge between what would have been Wilson and Wilson, and I forget the other school, but they merged and all went to Truman. You know, and back then in Levittown, it was quite segregated up until the point that they merged the high schools. You know what I mean? And he was a teacher at the forefront during that time period. So I'm sure it was a transition. But you know, he had a unique teaching style, to say the least. And I just thought I'd share that quick story. That's it. Have a blessed day.